And Alderwoman Finlayson is coming on down.
So,
Good morning.
good morning, Sheila. Let's see, there's Fred. All right.
We just went live.
I'll call the Finance Committee meeting of 4 May to order. All members are present and accounted for. I want to talk about the agenda for a second. Sheila and Fred, did you see the email I sent over the weekend that was a revisit to David's list of the following discussion items?
No, I did not. When did you send it?
Sunday morning.
Okay.
It's the thing that was broken into 8 categories, and it was the outstanding discussion issues.
I read it.
Okay. I thought we could start the meeting by just going over that and then add an item 9, which is we've got to start getting some discussion going about pulling together the report from the committee to the council. So the agenda is fairly general with regard to the Finance Committee deliberations. We're probably fine there, but we have new things here. R22 alcoholic beverages on city properties and a grant application for transportation. I've been told that the grant application is urgent, has time sensitivity, and Director Gordon is here to talk to about it. But first, I guess I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Before you do that,
Pardon me?
Finance also has a budget revision that they wanted to add.
A what?
A budget revision. I sent it to you guys this morning.
I did see that, and I did see what you sent yesterday, Ross. I printed it out.
All right, thank you. I'm not finding the budget revision.
942.
Yeah, I thought I printed it out, but I don't find it. Well, are we adding that to the agenda then? Because it's not on the agenda now.
Is this the one for tree removal for OEP, Takia?
Yes, it
Yes.
is.
Okay.
Can I suggest we put that on tomorrow's agenda or Wednesday's agenda? I don't have it. I printed it out, but I can't find it. But is there a time sensitivity that it needs to be done today?
I believe there is. I don't know if Jackie's joining the call today, but she's urgent to get this money to do some special tree removal. The owners of the property are supposed to reimburse us when we're done. She doesn't have any money left in her budget to do the tree work.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I can't find that.
Surely a day is not going to make a difference.
Yeah, I don't think so. So let's just approve the agenda as it stands. We'll try to get that on the agenda later this week. So we have.
When was it sent out? I'm not finding.
942 this morning.
Yeah, so we can't, we're gonna have to, I know everybody's rushing, but we just can't pile these things on at the last minute. In reading R22 quickly, I'm not sure I even know what it is, but I'm not sure I'm inclined to approve it. I definitely want to have some discussion. I hope Alderwoman Tierney is gonna be here to get into that. But in any event, we have an approved agenda, and we do not have minutes. Did I see that?
No, we don't.
We don't have
Did we
minutes.
vote on the agenda?
No.
Oh, all in favor of the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. I suggest that we move directly to the R23 grant application from the Maryland Transit Administration. Director Gordon is here, and I'm hoping he can walk us through what is a rather lengthy document.
Oh,
Are we seeing that document or?
It's attached in Granicus.
Okay. I'd like to thank Mr. Gordon for sending the information on the garage uses as far as the passes are concerned. I asked for that information week and it was forthcoming. I did send some
I
other
didn't
questions.
see that. Did I get that? I don't remember seeing it.
no, I did not send it to you, but I will.
All right, thank you.
Alderwoman Finlayson, I saw your request for additional information. It just happened that I was logging on here at the time. Once I'm off, I'll get you response.
Okay. I just didn't know the difference between the two numbers. So
Okay.
thank you.
If you all would like, I'll start with the ATP.
Please.
This is our FY 2021 grant application to the Maryland Transit Administration. It represents our grant fund request for this year. It consists of an operating grant of $1.3 million for our large urban fixed route operation and $189,299 for ADA operations and $699 for 2 bus replacements. In addition, we're also asking for $156,000 to replace skylift ramps. This is, at this point, it's our application. Once we get the City Council approval of the resolution, MTA can formally accept it into its program for FY 2021. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Well, let me start with, is this any different than what we do every year?
No, it is not. Same application.
And the
Slightly
only
different.
reason it's coming to us pre-application is because it's a large grant? Is there a match?
Yes, there is a local match required. For 2021, that local match is $1.699 million. But it is not that much different than last year's grant. I believe last year we requested a little more and we were awarded $2.1 million.
And I'll clarify that that match money is their operating budget that we are paying for from our transit revenues and parking revenues.
So there's no additional appropriation required to match the grant?
No, it's a part of the annual budget.
Well, the grant application itself goes on for pages. I don't know what the sense of the committee is. Honest answer, is anybody going to read all these pages?
Well, I think Mr. Gordon has encapsulated the information in the description. And I think those pages just elaborate on what those numbers represent. So, Mr. Chair, I would move approval of recommendation of approval of R2320.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that. I have to say that the my attachments at Granicus aren't opening, so I don't really know what we're voting on other than based on past experience that tells me it's necessary and that it's a good deal.
I did want to take a second to talk to Director Gerald, City Manager Gerald. David, I assume that you've reviewed this and this is fine with you. I guess I'm wondering about until we get stabilized with the pandemic, should we really be buying more buses?
Well, that's a great question. I think if we're able to increase the operating efficiency, and Director Gordon could weigh on this, but the operational efficiency by reducing maintenance or reducing fuel costs with new buses, I think it's worth purchasing them. Rick, do you want to comment on that?
Absolutely, that's exactly right. The buses that we're replacing have reached the end of their useful life. And generally with that, it requires a lot more costly maintenance. Before we put any of these vehicles on the list, ordinarily we have MTA reps here quarterly for our meeting. And we show them the vehicles as well as the maintenance history. So before we put the vehicles on the list, they would agree to it up front. So they know this is coming. They know these vehicles have reached the end of their useful life, and they're willing to fund them for the most part. It's either that or like City Manager Gerald said, we pay more for maintenance. And believe me, maintenance costs on a bus really go up once you reach the end of the useful life.
So I'll ask this for myself, but also because Alderman Gay or Savage are not here, but where are we in terms of fuel efficiency and in particular, where are we in the technology of moving to electric buses?
As much as I'd like to say we are moving in that direction, an electric bus at this point will cost 3 times what the diesel bus costs. And I'm not certain that MTA is ready to fund that for all the agencies yet. I think they've only funded maybe less than a half dozen at this point. But we are considering that, and the key for us would be the appropriate application. I don't think I'd want to do that to start with the larger buses. I'd probably like to start with something on a smaller scale, and with us looking at this flex route that we were trying to consider this year, that may be more appropriate than starting with a large bus.
And that's certainly our strategy from this citywide perspective, is to start with the smaller vehicles that are, that are proven, they're tested and proven, and we know they're going to be successful. The larger vehicles don't have that same experience.
Right. Well, this is, Fred, were you able to get in to your Granicus?
I can get into Granicus. I could open the attachments.
Do you need time to do that, or?
No, I mean, based on my experience in years past, assuming this grant is the same as the other ones have been, I don't really need to go through it.
Okay. So that being the case, unless there are further questions from the committee members, I would entertain a motion.
There is a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
And seconded. All right. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. All right. Thank you, Director Gordon and Dr. Kwaku.
Thank you.
All right. What is the taste of the committee to go back and look at this alcoholic beverages legislation, which, I mean, I guess I have the general sense of why in the midst of pandemic and virtual meetings and no public testimony are we moving forward with legislation like this, which I know will be controversial among some quarters.
We have the city attorney on if you would like to speak with him.
If you could fill me in on what part of where we are on the legislation.
Well, we just looked at it, Mr. City Attorney. It's Resolution 20-22, and it's a beverage consumption on city property. I didn't even know we could consume alcoholic beverages on city property, but this seems to assume that and goes on to put a cap on it. My basic question is, with these kinds of legislation, given the ongoing pandemic, the fact that we are having virtual council meetings and really no meaningful way of getting direct public input, I just question whether things like this should even be on our agenda at this time. Our agenda meaning council's legislative agenda. So,
Mr. Chair, may I add something? This
Please.
is a licensing, our theaters, for example, and I think this is the example that's on page 2, when they have, opening night or whenever, and they have a little reception beforehand, they have to have a liquor license. And this speaks to the fact that it's $5 a day. So if they open their theater for 100 days of the year and serve beer or wine, then they pay $5 a day. So this legislation is saying to cap that so that it doesn't exceed $100 a year.
Yeah, I understand that. First of all, how many of these events are we going to have until we're out of the pandemic? But secondly, I guess still my question, we've had this discussion before the council about the lack of being able to have in-person public hearing. I don't know whether this is or is not controversial. It doesn't seem to show that it had a public hearing. So we're it. It's just coming to us. And I guess I really would argue more strongly that we ought to postpone consideration of this legislation until we can have public comment, first of all, and secondly, have meaningful public comment.
I don't disagree that it's not of a timely nature. It's on first reader, or it was approved for first reader. So why is it coming to us now is the question. Takia, can you answer? Ms. Green, can you answer?
Yes, it's the process. So it was moved on first reader. It's a resolution. It doesn't have public hearing. So it was referred to finance. So it's coming to you guys and it's on for second reader for Monday's meeting.
So because it's a resolution, it doesn't have to go.
It doesn't
to,
have a public hearing. Correct.
I think our long experience is that anything that has to do with alcoholic beverages anywhere, but most particularly downtown, needs ample opportunity for public hearing.
You guys didn't request one.
Well, I was going to say at a minimum, but my immediate reaction is, what is the meaning of a public hearing? Because we don't really have public hearings anymore. So I just think this is not timely. I mean, my preference would be that this would be more timely if we were back open for business and that we had a chance for the public to opine on this. But that's just me.
Mr. Chair, we could always send it back to the council on Monday and request that it have a public hearing. And we do have public hearings. It's in writing. So we shouldn't say that we don't have public hearings. The public does have an opportunity to weigh in. They may not like the format, but it is what it is during these unusual times. So, I mean, if we don't like, we send it back and ask for a public hearing.
Is that a motion?
Sure.
Is there a second? All right. Is there further discussion? All those in favor of recommending that this go back to the council from the Finance Committee requesting a public hearing, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Let's have it. All right.
It's unfortunate, Mr. Chair, that the sponsor of the resolution isn't with us this morning. So
and I do remember her making a cogent argument for why we should do this. I just don't really remember it, but I guess I'm frustrated to have all of this at the beginning of our Finance Committee meeting when I'm feeling a real pinch to get to our Finance Committee report writing. And this one in particular, I think, needs more exposure. So we've made that recommendation. The next thing on our agenda, I think we didn't put on the agenda this FT or whatever it is, so that'll be on tomorrow or someday later this week. The next thing on our agenda is to go back to discussing the annual budget appropriation. We had a very good walkthrough with the finance director last week. However, since then, we've received and Jody, thank you very much. I was starting to cut and paste all of the pieces of the Munis information into little slivers for each of the departments. And then, as promised, you gave us that page by page document, so we knew exactly where to slip it in. However, I will say for myself, I have not had time to look at that. And then I will quickly add, time is running out. So I guess I would put to my colleagues on the council, do you want to take up, because this is where we look at the department by department appropriations, amongst other things. We also have Schedule A, B, and C. At the time we discussed this last week, I did not have Schedule C. Those are, I think, important additions because they also, as an appendix, put in the revenue side of things. So what is the disposition of the committee to taking up this ordinance at this point?
Which ordinance are we talking about?
Ordinance 16-20, the annual budget and appropriation and property tax levy.
Oh, that.
Yeah, sort of the guts of the budget.
Yeah.
When is this going to be on the agenda?
Pardon me?
When will 1620 be on the council's agenda for second reader?
Sometime after we give our report to them on next Monday's council meeting. Presumably I'm hoping council members are looking at the budget already. And Jody, I did send out your data to all the other council members so they now can also put that in their budget books and use it as they see fit. We make our report Monday, and then that is the usual handoff to the council. I think we have done a lot more work, with of course the help of the departments, a lot more work. We've gotten all the information from the performance management system. We've gotten detailed explanations from each of the departments. And now we have the line item so that if we want to look under the hood for any one of the departments. But this ordinance is in the hands of the council now, and presumably the council will then decide what they're going to do to deliberate on the budget.
Mr. Chair, my question was when, can I get a short answer? When
June
is this
8th.
going to be on the agenda for the June meeting or the second meeting in May? And
June
the
8th.
key is, sir. What? I'm sorry.
June 8th.
June 8th. But I think I would recommend from the finance committee, unless the council is really going to just take a very cursory look at this ordinance, they ought to be looking at it now. And certainly I hope what we give them with our report on May 11th will get each of the individual members going. I'm not looking forward to how many 104 amendments that we had from a previous alderperson. Not looking forward to that. I'm hoping our finance committee report is going to make it fairly easy for them to go through and look at this. But it's in their hands it's still in our hands individually, but it's in their hands after we make our report on Monday.
Well, then we can make our recommendation on 1620 at not Monday's meeting, but the second meeting of May.
That's what I understand.
No, I think we're supposed to deliver our report the first meeting in May.
I'm not talking about the report. I'm talking about just the legislation.
Well, are you saying that the finance committee would not make recommendations on this legislation the same way we did on fees and fines?
Well, I'm looking at timing. Okay, we're working or need to be working on our report. Okay, is this going, and maybe this is the question, is this going to be part of our report, or is there a separate recommendation to the council on 016?
In the past, this has always been a part of our report. The authorizing ordinance, which is the actual appropriations budget, not the line item, but this. And it's actually been that way for quite a while. I think it was taken to a higher definition with last year's budget. It's just we were busy looking at other things. But this year's budget, I think it's been refined even more. It's been made much more comprehensive.
Okay, so the answer is yes, this is going to be part of our report on Monday.
Well, you're the committee. What do you and Fred say? That's my thought. I thought this was really the guts of what we would be doing, but that was just my sense. One of three members.
Well, I thought we did it at the second meeting in May. That was my understanding. You know, obviously, if we have to have a ready answer for Monday, we've got to do it sometime. Not today, tomorrow, or.
Well, frankly, I think by and large, we did it last week when Jody walked us through. And remember, we had some questions in the legislation at the end for the city attorney, sections 25, 27, and 28, that were questions about the boilerplate. But this sets forth the expected general fund appropriation of $86.3 million. It goes through and does individual adjustments. It recognizes the grants budgeted at $6.3 million. Talks about the sprinkler revolving fund, a whole bunch of all of these different things that we've been pretty much. So then it goes through the individual enterprise funds with their appropriated amounts for salaries, benefits, contractual services, supplies, and other costs, debt service. All of that is pretty straightforward. Talks about the self-insurance fund, health insurance fund.
Alderman Arnett,
Yes.
the code requires that you provide your comments on the mayor's proposed budget, which is embodied in Ordinance 16. So, and that's the second Monday in May, not the second meeting in May. So the report is required for the next meeting, and this is the that ordinance is the center of the budget, and the fees, et cetera, are all supplementary resolutions that take effect at the same time. So your comments on this ordinance would be required by Monday.
Yes, that's what I thought, and I appreciate that.
So may I ask, if we recommend approval of 016 as it's written, does that include reductions, postponing or assuming the postponement of salary increases for the employees?
I believe that is correct. It would assume that.
It would assume that. I think what you would be approving is the amount of the budget, and that reduction has been built into the budget. So if you were going to recommend it, and you had other ideas, you'd want to make sure you commented on different pieces of it.
I am very concerned that if we give blanket approval, then it's automatically
It's everything.
in support of the.
It's everything that's in there that you have concerns about, including reorganizations and stuff like that.
Right. So you're right. That doesn't even reflect restructuring this to reflect that there is in existence currently an Office of Environmental Policy. It does include all of the assumptions for the reductions in expenditures, that one pager that City Manager Gerald gave us, which I think is a timely thing to talk about, Sheila. And yeah, I think that you're right. We do need to talk about the assumption of the $689,000 savings by postponing the COLAs. There's some other things in that list that I think we need to talk about in terms of vehicle maintenance and operation. I'm trying to find that sheet, which I can't find right now. So that whole laundry list that City Manager Gerald gave us are assumptions about, here it is, about $3.8 million worth of reductions to the general fund. All of those are embodied in this ordinance. Most of which, other than having the opportunity, which I didn't get to over the weekend, to look at the line item for each of the departments to see what was offered up and what wasn't offered up. And I also wanted to look at, if we were not going to get this deferral of the COLA, where would we find that extra $700,000? And to me, there's two places. One is go back to the appropriations budgets for each of the departments. The other one is to go to the general reserve fund, where we have a surplus of about $2.1 million, and take more out of that. My reservation about reducing that, even though we're above required, if you look at page 24 of the binder, we're above required by 2.1 or thereabouts million dollars. It reduces the potential margin we have if next year the pandemic proves to be much tougher on us than we thought. So I think that we should consider, and of course we don't know. I couldn't make a recommendation because City Manager Gerald told us last week they just recommenced the negotiation with the unions. We don't know that they're going to accept that. So we will have to find at least that amount of reduction someplace else.
So,
Chair, my concern about postponing the COLAs until next year is that next year is going to be tougher. And so for us to pretend that it's going to be easier to live up to the obligation that we made to our employees on another, out year is flawed. It is fatally flawed as far as I'm concerned. So I would not support this budget with those assumptions that we're going to postpone the salary increases until next year.
I didn't think you would. I'm not sure. I probably for different reasons, but I don't think I support it either. I think it's a kick the can down the road, which is just going to make it that much tougher next year, even if the unions agreed, and I question whether they would or should. I think it's just—
They already have not.
Well, they've already not, but they've agreed, I believe, and we can ask David to weigh in. I think they've agreed to reopen negotiations. And
There is no, let me just say real quick here with Mr. Chair, there is no agreement, but no one has agreed or disagreed with the position. The positions have been stated, and they're waiting on the city to decide what it's going to do, meaning the city council, as far as the budget is concerned.
All right. So, Fred, you were starting to say something? Thank you, Mr. Lyle. I agree with you, and I appreciate that advisory.
May I ask Mr. Lyle a question, legal question? We have a binding agreement with our 4 unions. Under what circumstances can the city council break that agreement?
Well, the city council has various things that it can do. What we are attempting to do is renegotiate the terms. So it's not so much as an imposition of any particular position financially. It's a opening of a renegotiation, a big restart of the collective bargaining that was concluded a year or two ago. And that's really where we are. It's just a renegotiation of positions.
But I thought I heard you just say that they were waiting for us to do something with the budget.
Well, I think what I'm saying what I'm trying to clarify is that the city has, through the city manager, has stated an objective that it would like to get to financially in the budget, and has a way forward to get there. We are not saying in our entreaty to them that we are not going to give them the COLAs. We are asking that they renegotiate the timing of the COLA, which at the end of the day would result in the same amount of money to them, but moving it out into January. So they'd get the same money, if I'm reading it correctly, Mr. City Manager, to get the same money. It's just that they're moving it out 6 months.
So
They would get the same percentage increase.
Exactly.
They would get it in January instead of July. So clearly they would miss out on that first 6
It
months.
would miss out on 6 months worth of pay increase, and it would delay it from a future standpoint of future years building on what they have already. You lose some ground on that first 6 months. So they would lose 6 months of pay increases, but then that kicks in January. And as you know, we have not concluded negotiations with them at all. It's that we're working on it, and the problem is the timing and when you have to deliver your comments, and the timing on when that process will be completed.
So we've given them a position, and they haven't come back to us with an answer.
Right. So I would argue this puts us in a very untenable position. First of all, the union contracts are presented to the council fait accompli, take it or leave it. The only wiggle room is subject to availability of funds. I could not in good conscience make a availability of funds argument, because all I need to do is look at page 24 and see there are funds there, reserve funds there, that could be drawn down further. But I find myself now in the position of arguing against the administration's position. And actually, Mr. City Attorney, I would ask you, how much of this can we even be talking about as a council, given that these are negotiations that are underway between the appropriate administration authorities and the union representatives?
Well, I agree. I mean, we don't want to get too deep into the discussion. However, you've been given numbers, and I think your position going into next Monday is either you accept the numbers that the city manager is giving you, including the underlying assumptions, or you don't. You reject them. And if you reject them, then that, requires the city manager to go back and do something else with the numbers. That's different than a discussion about whether it's appropriate. It's either accept or don't accept. And then, that gives us at least a direction when we go back to discussing with you, maybe in executive session, the strategies to get to where we need to get to. But we have other options, and I just don't know what they are. But I'm just saying, if the city manager and finance have other options, we can talk about those if we get one option from you versus another, I think.
You have to look at the landscape across the country, I think, because, to put this in perspective, there's other cities and counties and states that are cutting staffing. They're doing furloughs. They're doing pay reductions, and we haven't proposed any of that. We proposed to push back a cost of living allowance by 6 months. This is pretty desperate times, and that's not really a desperate measure from my perspective that we're asking from the unions. But the unions wanted to wait. They wanted to see what these types of dialogues took place during the budget hearings to sense what sort of support they would have from the city council before they came back to the bargaining table to negotiate.
Director or Manager Gerald, the other side of that is that there are jurisdictions that are working to provide heroes pay for our police and our firefighters. So there are some that are, you're absolutely correct, that are having to cut positions. And then there are some that are rewarding the employees for the work that they are doing. And especially during these very difficult, dangerous times. So we should look at both sides. I think this is an opportunity for the council to share our philosophy on our employees. Okay. And my understanding.
And I agree. No, I agree because, and those would be one-time payments that would happen this current fiscal year with funding available this year. That's not looking forward to next year and what the budget picture is going to be next year for the budget. But that's how cities and counties are doing it. You're right. They're using one-time money in the current year to give stipends for the frontline people. And that is certainly, I understand that. And the people that are on the front line certainly are deserving of that with all that they're doing for us.
So Jody wanted to speak. I'd like to speak. Fred, were you trying to speak also?
No, sir.
All right. So Jody, and then I'll.
I just wanted to go back to the idea that we have more money in the reserves, and I assume you're talking about the budget stabilization fund. We are taking $473,000 from that, which represents a structural deficit going into 22. And if you were to forego delaying the COLA and put the 689 in the budget, and then instead you funded that with the budget stabilization fund, you are increasing the structural deficit we have going into 22, exacerbating the next budget, the round of budgets next year. So I just wanted to clarify, if we do that, that's what it's causing, and to remember that with the reserves.
How can you say that and not get flicked? But if I say it, I get flicked.
No, I'm saying that 473, which we have acknowledged in the budget process, is an issue and uses from our reserves to fund recurring expenses. And it's not where we wanted to go. It was where we were left at the end. And if
I saw your hand, Mr. Lyles, but I wanted to try to approach this from a different direction, which is to say to my colleagues, if we were not going to recognize this deferment of the COLAs, and we were not going to take it out of any fund reserves, the only place that I can think of that we can take it is to find other line items to reduce line items like supply and training that have already been reduced even more. But $700,000 is a pretty heavy lift to go back line item by line item, department by department. I thought that the spirit of the departments in making those concessions when they presented to us was good. I don't know how happy they would be to come back and be asked to make yet another contribution. That is cutting into things other than staff. We do have in here a notion, an item in the thing that talks about holding the line. It's the 2%, add 2% personnel turnover allowance in the departments. That's essentially, I think, the discussion of the freeze. We're not going to be hiring new people necessarily. The city manager has asked for discretion on managing vacancies, which I am personally willing to cede that to the city manager. And the city manager has said, along with finance director, that they are aware of the precarious times that we're going into and are willing to give us a monthly or bi-monthly, whatever it turns out to be, update as we go into the next budget to look at how our revenues and our spending are tracking. I presume that's being offered with the notion that if we find things aren't working out as we had budgeted, that we're going to be making some further adjustments. We're going to be making some further pullbacks. I would submit to you in terms of salaries and benefits, that's 80%, and in some, like public safety, even higher percent. So there's relatively little room to make additional cuts in non-salary and benefits. In the public safety arena, overtime is always something, but we have that trade-off between using overtime funds versus being able to fully staff up to our authorized levels, particularly in police. So I think that we have to figure out if we're going to go look for some additional cuts in lieu of the $689,000, or we could make a recommendation to the council that we don't support this and that it put it on the debate on the floor. I think we should do more than that, because I think we're the ones that are really into the details of this and have had the full benefit of all the presentations over these last few weeks. But that's into my say. I think City Attorney Lyles had a comment to make for us.
Yeah, just one comment, just to caution that when we judge what we're doing by what other cities are doing without full information about how they're doing it, we, probably tip into a dangerous category, only because every city has the push and pull of other items in the budget that they may not, that we may not have access to. They may have information, they may have funding sources, they may have relief from their unions prior to them, dealing with this in the public realm. So we want to be careful about judging what we do based on what others have said in the media, what they're going to give to employees, maybe through negotiations they've already established those things.
And I would tell my colleagues that I've been building a binder of all of the economic commentary on the impacts of the virus. And one of the things that I've noted is we are to some extent protected because we are so heavily reliant on property taxes, which at this point, we don't have an indication are going to take a nosedive. And I would certainly argue we shouldn't take action until we know that something's happening there. But unlike many other municipalities and counties that are much more heavily dependent on things like sales tax and even income tax, we are somewhat sheltered. So I think City Attorney Lyles makes a very good point. We can't compare ourselves to other municipalities necessarily, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't take a cautionary note that there is peril out there. Sheila, you were starting to say, yeah.
Yes, just to respond to Mr. Lyle's comment, and it sounds awfully one-sided. You're absolutely right. We don't have a clue what the nuances are of anybody else's budget, to be honest. But we do have relationships, and I do, as far as unions are concerned, and I'm not ashamed of it at all. I say no more. I think we have a responsibility as a committee. If we decide to not approve these, the elimination of the pay raises, then we should try to come up with the appropriation to cover that cost. So I have a question in that I'd like to know from City Manager Gerald what the cost savings would be if we froze all positions. And that's inclusive of police. I don't think there's a lot in fire anyway. I know police is like 14 positions that we've talked about as a committee. But if we don't hire any new or fill any new positions for the next year, what is the cost savings?
We can try to get that for you. That's difficult to determine because you just don't know how much turnover there's going to be. But what we can look at is the past few years, what the average has been, and try and come up with a number based on that. But it's kind of difficult to estimate.
Well, I'm asking about vacancies that exist today. not projecting
I
what
see,
might
okay.
be. Okay, but how many vacancies do we have right now?
Yeah.
Fred has Fred, I'm not sure where your legislation is at this point, but your legislation, I believe, was to freeze all hiring. And if
Except
we
for
did
public
that,
safety. Except for public safety and the what do we call our exempt employees?
okay, I would like to know what that would mean for everybody.
Well, I haven't gotten that information back from finance yet, which is why it hasn't been submitted to the county.
So what I'm asking for is an accounting of what the savings would be if we froze all positions for this budget for the next year. And Jody, I can look at your face that it's not not a happy thought, but that's what I want to know, because that's got to be a consideration for us.
Okay, right now, we have 43 vacancies across the city. So you're saying just freeze those, and then the ones that become vacant through the year would also be frozen? So we would do 0 hiring through the year?
I think I would definitely want to know the savings for those 43. And we need to talk about what it would mean if we don't fill any vacancies that occur during the course of the year. You know how I feel about eliminating people and not eliminating the jobs that they did. So to have vacancies and then have a job that now somebody else who already has a full-time job has to assume the responsibilities for is not something I would endorse either. So I think I need both calculations. If we freeze those 43 vacancies and what it would mean if we froze any other vacancies that occurred throughout the year, with the caveat that if those positions are vital positions, the ones that become vacant, then we have a mechanism where the directors can come and make a request, an exemption of some sort. That makes sense?
Yeah, so it would be similar to what we had a few years ago when directors had to come to the finance committee to get approval to fill positions.
So can I?
We had something similar.
And I'm not saying that to us. I mean, it could be to you, David. So,
Jody?
So I did see the legislation that's out there from Alderman Payon. It has a statement in there on this is going to save this amount of money, but I cannot give that amount, which is what I told the staff in the Office of Law. I can't provide that amount of money because I don't know, because it exempts so many vacant positions, and we don't know what the ones, I mean, we can get a list of current vacant positions, but we don't know how that's going to play out over the course of the year. So it's possible that if you don't fill positions in it's critical work, as you said, Alderwoman Finlayson, you eliminate a position, but you don't eliminate the work, then somebody's got to be either hired or paid overtime to do that same amount of work. So I can't estimate any dollar amount that would save. However, we can analyze current vacancies and see what that salary is. But what we have advocated is, instead of freezing the vacancies, add to the turnover allowances and allow us to manage that would be a better option than trying to freeze additional hiring, so that the managers of the departments can control how they're managing their workload.
we haven't talked much about the turnover allowances by department. Last year, we had a big discussion about that. I think it was with fire. Do we know what those numbers are? Well, I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I can tell you where I put the turnover. If we take turnover out of fire, because they do occasionally have vacancies, they have to fill those vacancies with overtime, which is what they're required to do. So I placed very little turnover into fire. Police always carries a significant number of vacancies at a time. They tried to fill them, so I gave them a pretty good turnover allocation, and I spread the rest among other departments that I thought typically have turnover during the year. So what we have taken as a whole turnover cut has been spread to the departments as we felt appropriate based on their past vacancy rates.
So
And
you do have,
I have a schedule that shows you where we took those from.
and how much that would amount to.
Yes, yeah. How much was put in each budget for turnover? I do have that.
Okay. I think that would be helpful to us.
I would remind the committee, I don't know if you have the sheet from the city manager, but there are other deferrals in there as well. There's another $500,000 in a deferral for the contribution to the 401A plan and benefits till January 21st for employees and retirees over 65. So that's a deferral of $1.2 million. When you add in the COLAs, we also have withholding $300,000 for the self-insurance fund. And we have a pretty big chunk of reductions in contributions to fleet operations and fleet replacement, totaling about $900,000. So really, there's a few big chunks in here of deferred payments, each of which I think have their own consequences, none of which we've really discussed as a committee, but all of which I think we would need to bring to the council's attention, because these are things that are holding down spending in the fiscal 21 budget. Some of them I think are already being questioned by committee members in terms of the COLA. I think there's other deferred payments that we should also be considering. And then I think there's a question of, we just got into doing this more robust fleet management and fleet replacement. And I know these are hard times, so we have to find places to take a hit. But I think the committee has really focused in on the heart of what is underneath the ordinance and the very things that we need to be mulling over and thinking about how we would advise our colleagues. I'll also remind you that tomorrow morning, the Financial Advisory Commission is going to be talking about the budget, and I suspect they'll be talking about a lot of these same things. So it could be prudent for us to wait to see what of any enlightenment they have for us. But failing that, I think we need to decide what we're going to do with these proposed reductions to the general fund spending. And there are other ancillary things. I looked at transportation. I think that the projections of what are the parking revenues and the fare revenues for transportation are optimistic, would be what I would call them, but also I don't see any attempts, and maybe I just missed it, but attempts to reduce spending, particularly in transportation, and especially since we're on a Saturday schedule. But those are all things that I think we need to discuss relative to this ordinance. I know Dewan's leaping to ask a question. Or Ellie wants to raise her hand. I have had conversations with other alderpersons, and they are talking about even deeper cuts in salaries and across the board kind of notions. I remind quickly every time we get into that debate that all of that has to be negotiated. We cannot do that on our own, but, and I know exactly, Sheila, what your response to those conversations would be, but Ellie?
I just have a comment. Since we recently received a lot of backup and detail, And I know you're running out of time, and it's unfortunate that this couldn't have been a first pass of some of this detail before we get into, structural, deducts and big picture deducts. And I just think it would have been a good opportunity at first blush to go through all of this detail and see opportunities for deducts. Or questions. For example, I don't know, in planning and zoning, I saw $240,000 for special programs. What's that? That kind of thing before we get into, salary cuts. But I don't know how much time you have or when that opportunity.
Well, no, your point is well taken. And I'll take the blame for not being clear enough what we were looking for. But we do have it now. And I think that there is still opportunity before we do our report. A lot of what can go into our report are things like the presentations from the departments. I think that the presentations we got from Public Works on the rate setting are very valuable things. I think the presentation that the city manager gave us at the work session is a very good comprehensive picture. So I think we can put together a fairly useful report. I think Duan's next, and then Jody. I think we can put together a very helpful report for the committee. And I think that we can say things about these proposed reductions to the general fund without offering a favorable or not unfavorable recommendation to the ordinance. So I think there is still time. I had anticipated that next weekend was going to be agony in trying to punch up a report. It almost every finance committee year is. This year we have a lot more substance to report on. But I think there's still time, and would certainly encourage all of our colleagues on the council to take advantage of the materials we got to look at the detail. That's why we're asking for it. And I think that there are some interesting things on the revenue side as well that I've looked at and want to talk about. But Duan, you had your hand up next, and then I think, or Jody, do you have a comment that we should intercede first?
Yes, just to answer what Alderwoman Tierney had just asked about. Part of the process of putting the budget together, we do a pretty good job of scouring the numbers. And when we think somebody is asking for more than what they need, we trim it out of there and give them what we feel they need to do their current operations, and don't allow them to request any extra. And when we see that, we trim it out. And especially in this case, when we had to go back and trim the budgets before we even asked departments, we went back through and looked for opportunities where we thought we could take their appropriation requests down just a bit to keep them within their spending, their current level of spending. So that process has been completed. We did a pretty good job at it. I don't know what else you could find. The comprehensive plan is being done right now, and that 240 in Director Nash's budget is to take follow-up action on whatever the comprehensive plan calls for. So that's what that is, and it is a one-time expense. You won't trim money out of future budgets by taking that out of the 21 budget. Anyways, I want to say that because it was pertinent to what she said, and now
that's really important to know. I think so. Then ignore my comment. That process had to be done, and you did it. That's
hold that thought. Hold that thought. Go to page 22, where we're doing the total expenditures by fund, and I find it always fascinating to look at this page. Look at the CAFR, the actual audited expenditures for 2019 in the general fund, $84 million. Look at what we budgeted. We budgeted down to $83 million. We actually got in extra grants, so we went back up in the adjusted budget to 83.7 million. But look at the projected. And I think this is maybe a little more extreme than most years, but City Manager Gerald and I have commented about it, and I think it is consistent with what Director Dickinson has said. we're way coming in way low on what we budgeted for 20 for the departments. And I think that's been the experience every year. And that's why we end up having every year a surplus of spending over all of our revenues, including the grant revenues and other allocations from funds. So I think there is some tightening that could go on in the 21 budget. If you look at $81.4 million in 20 is where we think we're going to end up. And now we're saying we're going to jump to 86.3 million. That's a pretty big increase, and it's a pretty big increase in a time when things are slowed down quite a bit for some of these items because of the virus. So I think there could be room, but you have to remember most of that is salaries and benefits. So you can't cut non-salaries, benefits, overtime very much before you get to no room left and no lights on, no paper supplies, no copy machines, no phone bills, those things. So, this is always a delicate balance done by the finance department and the city manager. Nevertheless, I think there is room to believe that fiscal 21 will come in lower than $86.3 million worth of expenditures in the general fund, and lower than $147 million, $146.9 million overall.
Yeah, I just have to explain that the tree trimming doesn't add up to much, but apparently it's been done. I mean, I'd rather tree trim than take off a branch. I mean, thank you, Jody.
Juan, you've been waiting patiently. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just had two quick things. Sorry. The first is, so in regards to the conversation that you were just having, when you go through and try to make these cuts, Jody, are they consistent across the board, or have there been more cuts to individual departments? For example, when I look at the Pitmore Recreation Center, one of the few departments, you could say transportation as well, but PIP is one of the few departments that actually has the opportunity to produce revenue. And so when we make so many cuts to it, and when we shortcut them staff and supplies to make ourselves competitive, don't we end up shorting ourselves in the long run, bringing in revenue and actually getting our residents to want to go to our to that facility for childcare, for fitness help, for anything. Sometimes don't you have to spend a little money to make money?
I'm not sure. The question there is, we go through each department, everyone, and say, who needs to spend this money based on the programs they're delivering? Are they spending what they've asked for? And we try to trim those out. But if there was something that, if we don't have a field trip, we don't spend these expenses. Those are things we would take into consideration. But I wouldn't say that we heavy-handedly trimmed out Rec and Parks expenses. The ones that you see on that list were things they offered up when we told them we really need to tighten our belts. What can you do to save funds next year? That's where all those cuts came from. But we're very thorough with every department. We don't favor departments. I gave up some too.
I get worried about Parks and Recs. I feel like they get the short end of the stick often.
And it's unclear now when they can resume full operations too. I mean, we're hoping by fall, but if as it is right now, we're still incurring expenses there, and we don't have any programs coming in, so we're keeping them on.
Yeah, and then secondly, would this be a good opportunity possibly to go to the state and see, what other ways they would allow us to bring in revenue so that there isn't such a burden on the property tax? Can we get a little change from the sales tax or something? I don't know. I'm not really a tax expert. I'll defer to someone who is and point me in the right direction. I don't mind making the axe. I'm just, saying right now, and I think that this COVID has shown us that we really have weak spots in our economy in the city of Annapolis when it's so heavily based on property tax and tourism. And when both fall flat, then what do we do?
So can I take a?
That's actually a positive for us. If we were more reliant on sales tax or income tax like the state is, we would be in a much worse situation than we are today. So going to the state when they're so short on funds and they've frozen all their funds would be difficult right now.
So what do you do if this thing goes out long and we don't? So tourism is completely slowed down. And then, I don't know, something bad happens in the economy and the property tax tanks and the property's value isn't as high. So what will we do in that situation?
Look for further reductions. And that's
right.
that's what we need to do. We need to keep looking at the projections through the year and see. And again, the property tax won't change next year, but it could in FY22 with the reassessments. But if the rest of our budget continues to not perform like we expect it to, then we're gonna have to look for additional cuts.
So, but when we continue to cut down so much, I mean, then we get into the trouble of what Jody mentioned earlier, where, yeah, we've cut, 18 staff members, but now 6 people are trying to do the job that 18 people used to do. So we'll still have to pay for that in the long run. I mean, I guess would that be the only option?
I will quote Alderwoman Finlayson: "When you cut people, you cut services. You can't do more with less. That it just never works out that way." So if we're going to cut people, if we have to get to that, then we've got to look at services and what services we can do.
Let me say something, Sheila, and then I'll go to you. But 2 different things. One, Duane, I'm glad to see that you'll be carrying on my banner that we need to go to the state continually and ask for more resources. But the city manager, Gerald, just reminded you that is a 2-edged sword. The more you get dependent upon sales tax or some other source of revenue, the more you're going to be subject to these volatile swings with things like pandemics or housing bubble bursts and those sorts of things. That's one thing to say. The other thing to say is, well, each of us have our own little quibbles with this proposed budget. I have to say, I think that we are in pretty good shape. I would rather be us than most any other municipality in the country and even in the state. I think that we've had good stewardship. We've been guided through this process with a lot of thought and skill. And if the budget went through exactly as was proposed by the mayor, I'm not sure I would be deliriously happy, but I'm definitely not going to be unhappy. I think that it's the right place to start. City Manager Gerald has said that we're going to be doing constant monitoring of this and coming back to the council and the finance committee if we see some cloudy storms on the horizon, some disruption that we need to worry about. And then we will have to take some actions, and they won't be medicine that we're going to want to take, and it could be reductions in services. I think right now, for me personally, as an economist in the global world, the last thing I want to do is to make people unemployed. You're throwing them into a terrible, terrible situation, the worst we've seen since the Great Depression. And to be blunt, with the leadership we have at the top, I'm not sure we can come through this like we did with President Bush under the housing bubble behind, because I don't see the leadership there. I hope we're going to have people that are going to bring us back from this quickly, but I'm not interested in putting people out into that horrible environment. Maybe a little cutback on salary for a little bit, maybe if that becomes necessary, yeah, but not putting people out on the market, which means they will be here to provide the services that we've provided for our constituents. I don't know about in your ward, and I probably have one of the biggest complaining wards, maybe only second to Ellie, but probably not. I don't get a lot of complaints about our services. I really don't. I get complaints about zoning and those sorts of things, but I think we do a pretty good job. And I think that Marcia's presentation, when she did the DPW presentation, showed you how good a job we do and where they see rooms for improvement. She was very honest, brutally honest about that, where she felt they didn't measure up to their benchmarks, and talked about how they were going to address it. So I have a hard time feeling any guilt about the way the city's run or our stewardship of the city. This is tough times, and budgets are always tough, and there's always trade-offs. But I don't think we're going to get anything more from the state this time, any more than we've ever gotten in all the decades, and particularly when we had Delegate Bush leading the charge for us. And B, I hope we can stay as sound as we are right now. If we can pull through this, I think we all should be congratulating our administration. Off to the soapbox.
Then it's my turn to get on mine again?
Yes, please.
But I agree with you, Ross. We have, first of all, David said what I was going to say and what I've said time and again. We cannot eliminate employees without eliminating services. And what are those important services that the community values? And sometimes we think we know the answer to that, and other times we don't. Duane, you have an excellent right to be concerned about the Recs and Parks employees, the transportation employees. You know, most of our employees are not at the top of the salary rung. You know, most of our employees are towards the bottom. They are not people that can afford to miss paychecks or a salary increase. You know, we've got quite a few people at the top who make considerable money who really could take a pay cut. But those folks that are in Recs and Parks and transportation cannot afford that. And so we need to keep everybody in mind. You know, if you eliminate a position, you're eliminating a job. If you eliminate a person, you're eliminating a job that's being done, and we need to recognize that. So that's, you know, that's my soapbox. I'm done.
I agree with you really when you say that, you know, trimming off the top is the best way to go. Because I think it's crazy to suggest that, okay, you know, let's cut this front desk worker or let's cut this bus driver while, you know, people make $100 and whatever up at the top. I mean, you could slice that salary and pay 2 bus drivers, you know? So I think that if we do any cutting or any trimming, it should be at the top, not at the bottom.
And we did eliminate positions in the past. I mean, we have done that in the past. And then we realized that we needed those positions and we brought them back. So it's a tough position. We are in a good place right now, as Ross just said, and we can't pretend that the doom and gloom has struck us. It has not. And, you know, we are getting stimulus money that we're not talking much about, but Anne Arundel County is going to get $100 million. I think it's $101 million in stimulus money. And what percentage of that is going to come to the city? Hopefully, in my mind, we should be helping our small businesses. And I think that's part of the effort. But we should be giving grants to our small businesses to help them get back on their feet or stay afloat, but to help them stay in our city and become part of our vibrant community. It's going to take some work on everybody's part. And that's what the new task force is working on, helping small businesses to recover. But there are monies coming. So for us to pretend the doom and gloom is here, it's not here yet. So we should take advantage of where we are, but plan for the doom and gloom down the road. But don't take it out on our employees today when it's unnecessary.
Fred's face speaks volumes.
Is there a way to, will we be
I never looked at it that way.
You look bored.
Is there a way that we can see maybe in some report the salaries of the department heads and basically any staff that make over $100,000? I'd like to be able to see that on a scale of like maybe from like 2010 to now, to see if there were any substantial raises or cuts. And then I'd like to see, bottom employees, and then look at that to see if there were any substantial raises or cuts, and just see the comparison. Is that possible?
I think
Everybody's looking at me crazy.
no. I think you can certainly ask for that, but I think Attorney Lyles has got a comment to make.
I know.
Just want to say that with respect to department heads, all of those are made public. They're printed in the paper and other places, as well as you can get a salary schedule that Trish can send you, which details all of the individuals at the top levels, their grades. And
I think I'm asking for to be more detailed than the capital, than what they present. If we could get it by like 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, all the way up from the last decade, really, and look at salaries of department heads and just see what kind of trend there is. Because I'm concerned that if we do eventually have to make cuts, that it will be at the bottom. And I'll say it again, I hate to see that. I think it should be the other way around. Not cuts in people, but cuts in salary.
So we have gotten that detail in the past, and we can get it again. I can tell you my observation of my experience with that is that it invites the usual suspects writing really nasty letters about how fat, dumb, and happy our city employees are and how outrageous their salaries are. And that's their right, and that is their view. But I've never seen it do anything beyond that, anything productive. It's the reason we did the class and comp study, which is now getting fairly old and probably needs to be revisited, I hope with a different contractor this time. But that's why we do those class and comp studies, to look at how we're paying our people relative to their peers elsewhere in the county and other appropriate places to compare with them. I think that there were some things that were on the high side, and there were some things that were on the low side that came out of that last class and comp study. I think there were some techniques that I would have liked to have seen a little more robust, but we do look at that. And
are the salaries based off of when we look at hiring and stuff, and this may be a Trish question. I know there are a number of things that you guys look at, in education and previous experience, but do they also look at the use of the department itself and how much work that particular department head may be doing? Because for example, now as we shift to this post-COVID lifestyle, I think probably one of the most important department heads would be MIT, as we all need this, and this operates and works. So I mean, how does that operate? Are we really analyzing the salaries and getting the best use out of it? I guess is my question.
MIT has always been important when we're looking at how we pay people, and I'll let City Manager Gerald speak in a second, but it's based on knowledge, skills, and ability and level of experience. In terms of how much they're needed, that is the direct management decision made by City Manager Gerald and the department heads. And they need to make their justification to the city manager, as we recently did for the assistant in purchasing, and raising the level of pay there because of the level of responsibility that we wanted that job to have. Those are management prerogatives. We as a council have the right and privilege. Is that Fred with your hand up? The right and privilege to oversee that to some degree, but not not micromanage by any means. It's more like we can look at that and have a conversation with the city manager and anyone he deems we should have a conversation with. But those are very largely administration type issues. But maybe Director Gerald, you can speak to this.
Yeah,
Manager,
I guess I would just say it feels like we're getting a bit far from where we want to be, because we're not talking about any personnel cuts. We're not talking about any pay cuts. What we're talking about is a 6-month deferral of a 3% increase in pay. So all those things are meaningful, but we're on such a short schedule here that feels like we've moved where we were about talking about these pay reductions. There's no personnel cuts. There's no personnel pay reductions.
So thank you for that. That's a perfect segue.
I still like
to get back to the legislation. Go ahead. One last, Ron.
No, I'm just saying I still like to, if that report, if possible.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's something that I think Trish can get for you. In the ordinance itself, the one that we've really been talking about is on page 1, line 40, which is what is embodied in this $86.3 million. I would say that there are some other things that I would be interested in talking about, and it's really talk, not questioning, not suggesting something we could do. But if you go to page 2, section 4, we have a reasonably robust increase in the number of grants we're assuming we're going to get. I think that that's something we need to pay close attention to. With all the money that the federal government and state governments are shoveling out for the pandemic, I'm wondering if they're going to have this amount of money for burn grants, Pell grants, a lot of the grants that we get that help support our public safety and those sorts of things. So to me, that's a question mark, something that we ought to be paying attention to. And then really, when you get down to it, you flip to page 5. I think we did a very robust discussion of the CIP. We've had a discussion of the capital plan. I think the capital plan is going to be much more interesting after the passage of the budget and when we get into the RFPs for Hillman and City Dock. But for this budget, I don't think there's anything particularly exciting in the rest of the legislation other than those 3 boilerplate legal questions for the city attorney. So I think that the decision for the Finance Committee in our report is what, if anything, we want to say. We could not recommend approval to the council of this ordinance pending their evaluation of the reductions in the general fund spending, in particular the deferral of these compensation amount, the COLA, the 401A, this is the first year I've even focused on the 401A, and this benefit, this $365,700, line 10 or number 10 of the reductions on David's list. So for our report, we could simply say, we have these questions for your general consideration, in not do what we did for the fee and fine resolution, which is recommend that they be accepted by the council.
Mr. Chair, I am concerned that if we're not clear, then our conversation, this entire conversation, will be. I think we should be extremely direct in what we expect. All of the items that you mentioned, they may total $1 million. Maybe they don't. Maybe they go over $1 million.
Yeah, it's 1.2.
1.2. So our choices are, in my mind, to leave the 86.2 and say that $1.2 million will be, we'll say where we want that $1.2 million to come from.
Okay.
Okay.
We got some work ahead of us then.
Well, that's one choice. And the other choice, of course, is to reduce the 86, which still means that we'd have to cut out $1.2 million somewhere else. You know.
Well, I
have one more question before you go on David's list. The 310,000 for school resource officers. Have we always been paying? Is this new money that was being proposed? I'm not clear of what that item is.
That's a new item that was being proposed and was included in the budget, and then we cut it out because we need to find cuts in the budget. So that's brand new. That's Bates Middle School, and they have not had those before. And that would be the first time that the city has actually had as part of the Annapolis Police Department school resource officers. They've been county employees in the past.
So they're a resource officer there, but it's a county officer.
Yes.
I don't think there are any at that particular school. I think those will be new ones. I'm sorry. Let me get it.
Is that for both middle schools or just Bates?
It's Bates.
It's for, there was at least one for Bates. There was one for, somehow Annapolis Middle School is in on this too, but they already had, I think they already had a school resource officer. We're adding one to Bates, and I don't know where the second one was going to be new, but we're funding 2 from our coffers. That's what we were doing. And
well, but we're not, according to
we were. That was the only enhancement that we had in there before we started having to make these reductions.
Just one second. Is Rhonda involved with this, and is she aware of this proposed cut?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't think that she's been directly involved with it, but I don't know if she's aware of the cut. We briefed it at the work session.
Yeah, you did. All right, Duan, you had a question?
Yeah, so will because I know the original situation was that Annapolis had an SRO officer and Bates didn't because it was a city school and Annapolis was in the county. So if we take away the proposed officer for Bates, will the county continue to pay for an officer there?
I don't think there is an officer there now, and I don't think they plan to add to their budget to have school resource officers there.
Could that be an ask that we make though to the county just due to safety reasons?
Well, that conversation, they've been involved with the conversation about those school resource officers. So we could certainly ask them again, but they were not willing or not supportive of that in the past when we had those discussions.
All right, committee. We have a half hour left ostensibly. I would like to make a couple of suggestions. The FAC is going to be discussing the budget. I don't know. I have no anticipation that they're going to get into the level of detail that we've just gotten into with regard to the ordinance, but I'm willing to wait and see. Ellie has suggested that we have the line item detail by department so that we can evaluate these proposed reductions in light
no,
of...
I withdrew that request based on what Jody said. I mean, I don't want you to spend the time. I trust what Jody did. I mean, unless we see something.
I am going to spend the time. So
okay.
I'm going to suggest that there's still more time, but
Sure.
I would think that anything we're going to do with regard to that really needs to be turned off on Wednesday, possibly even tomorrow, depending upon what's our schedule, because I think we really are going to have to scramble to start writing this report. I know Takia has it all pulled together and really has written it for us, but we need to review her work. She must not have.
She's not hearing you.
Well, can Takia share with us what she has so far? Is that right? something? No?
I think there's a lot of things that we can discuss quickly to put in there. We have taken a lot of actions. I think we have a few more to take. Those are certainly things that would go in directly at the front of the report. I think that we have some PowerPoint presentations that I think should go in the report, should probably also be made available to the council members individually so that they can decide whether they want to tuck it in their binders as I have, and I think some of you have, or not. I thought there was a lot of valuable information there. And I think that the schedule of things to debate, 1 through 8, is a pretty good potential index for the report. We haven't gotten into a discussion of the unduplicated appropriation table, which I find fascinating, but really haven't devoted time to. We did get a new list of full-time equivalents from Katie, which I think was 676 employees, not 613, because it includes contract employees and also full-time equivalents for part-time and seasonal people. I think we should pay attention to that. That's one of the things that we continually get hit about by critics from the outside, and it would be nice to see how that number has changed from previous years. So that would be a request that I would make, that we could pull together a table for 19 and 20 to go with the table for 21. That would be useful. I personally feel that we have handled the CIP, the capital budget. We've discussed the level of bond funding. We did not get into, because I don't think it's appropriate for this, the discussion of Hillman Garage and City Dock, because that's going to be taken up after the budget when we get into the RFP and deliberations there. I just mentioned my concerns in the ordinance about the level of grants, $6.3 million, what we're doing in terms of assumptions about hotel tax and other revenues that are being impacted by the virus. But I will hasten to add, I don't have a better offer than what's in the budget. I just have a concern there. And the same thing for the assumptions. We're assuming that parking revenues and transit revenues are basically going to fairly quickly return to post-pandemic levels. And I don't know what we do if that doesn't happen. That's why we are going to do this monthly monitoring. Sheila, was that a hand raise?
No, I was just trying to change my screen.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. In my general comments on the budget that I shared with the colleagues on the council, I still think that we have overall expenditures growing faster than revenues. I don't know how long that can continue. We've really been lucky in that expenditures don't grow as fast as we budget, and therefore I think we get closer to being in balance. But I particularly if we have a bad year and we don't have surpluses and things that we can transfer, I think we're putting ourselves in a precarious position. But that's just me, may not be shared by everyone. I think that we got very good information. For me, it just goes right in the report on the enterprise funds. Excellent presentations across the board. We've talked in number 7 on the list about the monitoring plan that the city manager has proposed. I think that's probably the best we can do at this point because we really don't have enough information. I mean, if someone said you need to make $2 million more cuts because of problems coming up in 2022, I don't know how I would justify that number. And I certainly don't know where I would go to find that money, because I think then you are cutting into muscle, you are cutting into people, and I just couldn't argue to do it without some stronger basis. I have talked to colleagues that think we should do that, and I think that's their right to bring that up, and I'll look forward to hearing their plan. We didn't really talk about liquidity instruments when we had Davenport here, but I'm not sure how much we need to worry about those at this point. And we can always have them back if we decide we need them. We do have to have, in the discussion, Sheila, I saw email exchange about the deputy city manager, but more importantly, the Office of Environmental Policy.
Well, do we have a deputy city manager? We do not have a deputy city manager. So
No,
where
we
did
don't.
it come from?
I know.
And it needs to be corrected.
I know, but it was a proposal. I'm almost done, Duana, and I'll get to you. Alderman Savage suggested that we have a review of our financial policies. I think we've been doing that on a pretty regular basis, and we've been making what I feel to be pretty strong improvements. I'm not sure we have the time as a finance committee or the council for this budget exercise to get into that, but certainly always open to that. I think we discussed the artifacts from the University of Maryland. Roberta and Planning and Zoning have a plan for that. They have the money for that. I will have a one-on-one conversation with Dr. Leone. I think that there's a lot of good things in the works there, and the collection will be protected and find a good new home. We had discussion about, and it actually came from Susie, about some of the titles in the mayor's office. Not sure that that's a hot button issue for the budget itself, but we could ask for Susie to come back and talk to the committee before we complete it, our discussions. And we had, and I would leave this up to the city manager and possibly the city attorney, this whole discussion of the fitness trainer relative to any risk exposure. And again, I'm not sure that's a budget issue for right now that we can address as the finance committee, but it was a topic that was on our parking lot.
And Mr. Chair, for the second time, there should be an F, and that F is the OEM positions. We keep ignoring that, and we're not going to ignore it. So please, there should be an F under other issues, OEM positions.
Conversions, right. I stand corrected, and you are right. And I did not add that to the list, but I will do that, and I just wrote it in on my list.
Thank you.
We have a lot of work left to do as a committee. I think that we've also accomplished a lot of work. We'll have to figure out how we want to proceed to close out any votes we need to have, and then I hope move very quickly to report writing. I had volunteered to take a crack at that. I will work with Takia to pull in some of the reports that we've gotten in PowerPoint. And then I'll try to have a draft ready for the committee. I'll commit to trying to have it ready for our Wednesday meeting. But anyone who wants to volunteer to help on that, I'm more than happy. Jody raised her hand.
No.
Everybody saw it.
I volunteered to do the editing.
Okay, good. Jody?
I ask that we make it as succinct as possible.
Well, you look at who you're asking that of.
And that's why
you're doing the editing, because I am not succinct. Jody, you were going to say something?
I just wanted to tell you that we've created a Google Share Drive that Katie will be sharing with you shortly. We put in there all the documents that we have sent to the council, to the finance committee to date. And Takia is going to send us anything else that's missing from that Google Drive, and we will put it in there and allow all council members to share it as well. So I know that Alderman Savage asked to see all those documents and have them electronically. So we've put that together. We'll have it to you today. And then anything that's missing from that you would have received through somebody else that didn't come through us should be added to the drive.
And then I called Brian Paquin to find out how to use that.
Can we also put the PowerPoints there?
Our PowerPoints are there. The two that we did, there were two that we prepared, one my finance department and two, the one that the city manager and I did the other day. Those are both in there already. And the other PowerPoints, we'll have to look for those. I'm not sure I got all departments in one place. I'd have to go back to search emails.
All right, can I get hard copies?
Takia, you have all of the PowerPoints we received from presentations, right?
Yes, they're all connected to the agenda.
So perhaps
to the
for the
departments.
report, we just simply give people a reference to this Google Drive so we don't have huge volumes of paper and maybe instructions for people like me that are not sure.
Well,
how to use that, but
it's only for us, right?
The Google
it's
Share
for all the
Drive.
council.
Yes, but when you make it a part of the record, that might become a public record, and that would be a difficult thing to share with everybody in the public. So I'm not sure how to do that, actually.
Well, all the
All right, well, that's a
departments
question
have
for City Attorney
ID
Lyles.
numbers.
Yeah.
So all the departments have an ID number, and anything that you guys recommended or their attachments are connected to the ID number. So you could look it up on Legistar and by the ID number.
City Attorney Lyles, please.
Yes, hopefully you can hear me. I don't know if we have to think about those PowerPoints because the PowerPoints give information that is not part of the public domain through the budget process, but was used for clarification. So if there is a need by department to submit the PowerPoint, we should probably consider it first before we make them public.
I think they're
already public.
They are?
And I think
Yes,
they should
they
be
are
public.
attached
I don't
to
think-
any agenda that they were presented on.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well,
So-
that's that.
I really do think we might want to at some point have a discourse about that after budget, about what we talk about. Basically, my attitude is if I'm seeing it and talking about it, unless it's specifically marked that it is not for public consumption, and City Attorney Lyles, you do send me missives that say things like that. But otherwise, I feel if I see it on the eyes of my constituents, they get to see it too. And if we have a different policy than that, I think we need to formulate it and get that enunciated and then stand back for the onslaught. Just like our poor governor is suffering people coming after him about doing the right thing for the pandemic policy and violating their First Amendment rights. But
I agree.
anyway, did I see somebody wanting to speak? I did have one last thing. Okay, Alderman Gay. Alderman Gay?
Oh, okay. Are you done with what you were talking about, or I didn't want to
I
jump
was
in.
going to introduce a new Technicolor topic, but go ahead.
Yeah. I had two quick questions. Yeah, the one, I think the Google Doc is a great idea. I'm looking forward to it because it puts everything in there. But so when we want to, just correct me if I'm wrong, I can't personally recommend any amendments right now.
That's a good question. I think
Not during finance committee, but you can submit them to the Office of Law.
Okay, so if I had to, if I wanted to tweak something, I would pull that, I guess because I'm running into issues when I look at the budget because I don't know what money is, what money can move around and what can't move around. But I do definitely have several amendments that I'm interested in making. Maybe I'll talk to you offline, Ross.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I think that one of the reasons why the committee meetings are open, and we're delighted to have our colleagues join us, is you also can have direct input into our deliberations, as you have been doing right now, and you are having an impact. But in terms of specific amendments to the budget, there are lots of rules of the road about moving money across funds and things like that, which I can guide you, but much more expert guidance would be the finance director, and she's not very busy these days, so kidding.
I'm unclear. Alderman Gay can bring his amendments to the Finance Committee. We can vet them, and if we agree, then we include those as part of our report. So when it comes to the full council, they're already incorporated in the recommendations that we're making.
Yes,
Frankly,
but he would
I
have to
think
go
that's
through
the
the Office
ideal-
of Law
So he doesn't have to go to the Office of Law to
to create amendments.
To draft them. and
Yes,
to
he
make sure
does.
We're hitting the right line items, et cetera, and are worded correctly. Yes, you would want to get the
Okay.
advice.
So, Dewan,
So
bring.
here's my big one. Here's the big one that I'm really concerned about. The other stuff I'll get opinion from you offline. So what if I wanted to, God, I guess I'm just going to let Kathy. So what if I wanted to say, like, the proposal for the deputy city manager? All right, what if I wanted to change the language in that to create my own separate proposal? Can I do that?
Well, of course you can do it. You have to do that through the Office of Law, but certainly if you want to discuss it at the Finance Committee, you can do that as well.
Well, I'd like to see.
Even if we don't put it in the final report, if we don't approve it, doesn't stop you from bringing it to the council as a whole.
Council. Yeah, and when I bring it to the full council, I'd need 5 votes to have it adapted. Okay, yeah.
Same as anything else.
What I would like to see though is, and I because you guys, Ross and Sheila, y'all looped me in, and I'm not going to stop talking about this Office of Community Caring. And you know, I think it's important right now when we start talking about this deputy city manager, for it to be someone who has. Let me not get into personnel. Let me know.
So on that one though, Dewan, and Sheila probably wants to speak.
Critical that is, you know, it's just. When I look at the resiliency requirements and stuff, when I think of a city manager, I think of someone who is not directly focused on one specific topic, which is in this case environment. You know, something you're running the city. In this case, deputy city manager helping run the city, and I think the next most important thing under that is dealing with social issues in the city, and I think that falls in perfect with a start potentially to that office that we wanted to create.
So on both of the deputies, whether it's the deputy for environmental policy, we don't have legislation. It's not in the structure. The Finance Committee has said we want to have the budget showing the 3 people in the Office of Environmental Policy shown as that office and where they are now. And the monies, I think, stay the same. It's a matter of showing it in the organization chart. In terms of the community caring, that's something where we also need to see legislation to help define that. Sheila, you have said you're looking for some grant money, and this might be something where we could have a no-cost person attached to just OEM system taking it out of the air. That has to be approved by the city manager, and I think that there has to be work with the HR director doing job description, authorities, KSAs, all of those things. I think those are things that I want. I'm part of the cabal that suggested it in the first place, but I think we have a lot of work to do that I'm not sure it can get into this budget unless Sheila, you've got something that's going to write in at the last minute with dollars. And even then, I still think there's questions of HR considerations, job descriptions, where does the person get assigned? Does the city manager and the administration subscribe to that? There's a lot of work to be done. I don't personally see it as something that's going to happen before next Monday, and probably before the passage of the budget.
Let me be clear about my intent. My intent, and I haven't spoken to Mr. Lyles, even though we've said we need to talk about this, is to have legislation that will create the Office of Community Caring, and that we will get through grant funding a position to begin with. My hope is that the directors, the city manager, the HR director, and the finance director will help me come up with a way to do this. I believe that this is a philosophical approach to meeting the needs of our community. And I believe that that is our responsibility as a council. Okay, so I'm not looking for roadblocks. I'm looking for, this is what the council wants to do, because I think we have 5 votes to do this, and we need staff to help us make this happen.
And that's fine, and I would like to be included in that process. I think Dewan is indicating he would too. We'll see where we get. Dewan, you have other legislation with the city attorney about changing property tax relief and that sort of thing. I will tell you, I'm watching that with fascination. I have a feeling that that is not within our powers as a city. I think that has to be done at the state level, but I think that City Attorney Lyles has been pretty straightforward. We need on both of these issues to give him specifics on what kind of legislation we're looking for, and they will put it in the queue with their other legislative requirements. I do think, though, and I'm watching the city manager be stoic about this, I do think we need to include him in this conversation at some point.
And the property tax legislation is for 1 month. 1 month.
Yeah, I just don't think it's in our powers. Ellie, you had your hand up.
I do. And this is probably a philosophical question when we look at sort of the hierarchy of our issues and how the budget is organized in doing so, or as we're talking about the city manager's office. And my question is, don't shoot the messenger, is what is our responsibility to our businesses, specifically our small businesses? And where do we address that, or if we do, in this budget and or staff reorganization, et cetera, et cetera? I don't
So my
see
first
it
response
clearly.
is I think that's being done at least in 2 places. One, Stephen Rice and Faith Stewart. Hope Stewart in planning and zoning. It's also being done out of the mayor's office by at least a couple of people. But I think that you really do raise a good philosophical question, and it's one that I believe is going to be pressed on us more and more as businesses are suffering terribly from the pandemic, and some of them may be just going away. But I think that that is definitely a council policy level kind of discussion, whether it's for the budget or not, other than to the extent that we're allocating funds for those operations. Sheila?
Mr. Chair, may I respond to her question? I think I am on the Small Business Recovery Task Force. There are probably 40 people on this task force, and their goal is multifaceted, but to help small businesses get back on their feet in the city. Dick Franyo and Stephen Rice are the chairpersons for the task force. And then there are 5 subcommittees that have responsibilities for example, events how to plan something to announce the opening of our city. One of the subcommittees is kind of a legislative committee. I co-chair it representing the city. Sarah Elfred is on it representing the state. And I think Joe Rubino representing the academy, to talk about legislation or what has to happen to maybe ease some of the regulations so that small businesses will be able to operate again. The federal government, as I mentioned earlier, is giving Anne Arundel County $101 million. A portion of that, and who knows, and maybe David can speak to it, I know they're still in negotiations, will come to the city in some format. I spoke to the mayor about taking a couple of $1 million from that and giving grants directly to small businesses, because I've heard from small businesses and that's what they're asking for, and they see that that's going on in other places. The mayor said that the county is going to be dispersing the money because they have a process and we don't. So the challenge will be making sure that our small businesses get in on those funds. And so, David, is it okay to share anything about that?
Sure. No, we're still talking to them. Much of that money is going to go to the Department of Health with the county, of course, as you would expect, since this all has to be COVID related. But we're negotiating with the county to either get directly a portion of that 101 million, or to be able to get it allocated to us where we would get reimbursed after we spend money on COVID type uses. And we also have a small working team within the city, of course. Stephen Rice is part of that, but so are, the frontline departments, to talk about ideas for how we would spend that so that we can present that to the county to better demonstrate that we should be getting a portion of that 101 million. We're part of the county after all, and we don't have another route to get that CARES money other than through the county. And they seem amenable to sharing a portion of it. It's just a matter of how much of that 101 million that we will have reserved for us.
I think they should break us off at least 10 million off the bat.
Really?
No.
Yeah. No, I thank you.
agree.
I know I'm on a subcommittee of the task force. In fact, I have the meeting at 1:30 today. We're talking about the budget, and I was specifically concerned about any sort of, financial injection, if you will. And it sounds like we're waiting on the county's allocation. Okay.
So it's 110 million. You want 10%, even though the city is only 6% of the county population. Good deal if we can get it.
With the view, we have a view, okay?
Yeah, so I'm saying it's a good deal if we can get it. I also, some of you might know, my son is now a congressional lobbyist, sort of like Ian Pfeiffer. And one of the things that they're coming up with is it's not just the small businesses, it's all of the people who work for the small businesses. And I think we're not taking care of the waiters and bartenders and all of the people who, even more than the small businesses, are out in the street now and could well be ever more out in the street, have to face a fundamental change in how they supplement or earn their income. And I think the federal government has not done a very good job of getting dollars to them. And one of the things that businesses and monopolists seem to always forget is they don't have any income if you don't have consumers. And consumers are the people that earn a living at the restaurant, at the nail shop, at the barber shop. And when they don't have income, small business isn't going to do very well either. They're both the employees and the consumers. So I think that we should not leave the workers out of that equation when we think about how we're getting help to people in the city.
Mr. Chair, as part of our discussion on this task force is about making sure that the money trickles down to the employees. And the belief is if you support the business, then the business owner has a responsibility to support the employees. And that's part.
What's that word? Trickle down? I don't believe it. I'm sorry, never have believed it.
That's been a issue that you hear on the federal level. They're concerned because they've heard from the average workers that, you know, money's coming in and it's not getting to where it needs to get to. And I think we can make sure that that is not a problem here.
That's why we have to support UBI. You know, the best way to get people to the money is to put it directly in their pockets. And, you know, whatever, regardless of whatever you think about the guy, him, Pelosi and McConnell have figured out a way to get that UBI delivered to us in the form of that $1,200, you know, stipend. And that really helps, you know, the American people, the people who did receive it at least.
Are you saying that you think that candidate Yang dropped out a little too soon?
Oh, I thought you were about to say something else about that.
Look, we got to pull this back because we're over time now. But Takia or Jody, do we have a way to connect into the PAC meeting for tomorrow? I looked to see if there's a Zoom or some other way that we're supposed to be able to dial into that. And
I am not sure because I don't do boards and commissions.
Yeah, Hillary's setting that up, Alderman Arnett. Hillary's setting that up as the boards and commissions person. Okay. So we'll make sure that you all get that.
Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, I plan to watch it. I would think it'd be good for all of the council members. Our FAC members are always very thoughtful and productive in their thoughts. So I'd like to do that. The one last thing I wanted to bring up today, and others could have others, but we have this Technicolor sheet that purports to show comparisons of select financial data from audited financial statements over the Moyer, Cohen, Panelides, and Buckley administrations. I don't know where that came from. Not even sure. I didn't go to my CAFRs to check the validity of it. And I didn't know if the Finance Committee was interested in taking a gander at this to see if there's some food for thought for us in terms of our Finance Committee deliberations.
Do we have that? I don't recall seeing that.
I got it. I can look for I don't even know. I think I got it in an email, but I can look for it and forward it to everybody if you didn't get it. I'm not saying we should take it up. I'm just saying it's out there. I suspect that it has a political position behind it. And I think, though, that it is also things that we're seeing from commentators from various sources in Ward 1, to be specific, not so much from Ward 8 yet, about the budget, its size, its growth, its composition. So I think that this is something that is out there in the ether. We might not have enough time to take it up. I'm not sure about the validity of the numbers anyway, but it is out there. So it will be coming at us, I think, in some form or another.
Mr. Chair, could we? I'm sorry. Go ahead, David.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
To get us organized, and I was going to suggest that at tomorrow's meeting that we take up the unduplicated appropriation.
I'd like to do that very much, and also the staffing counts.
Okay, and so we can take up both of those. I'd also like for us to take a crack at approving the CIP tomorrow.
I thought we had.
Do we have any changes that we want to propose for the CIP?
I thought we actually voted to approve it. If we didn't, you're right, that's unfinished business.
I don't believe we did.
All right. So CIP, what about the capital budget? I thought we had approved that as well.
Well, that's what I'm talking
all right,
about.
so those are two pieces of, I think, hopefully quickly addressed, because we got very good presentations on both of those. Yeah, so we should have, Takia, if we can have those on the agenda first thing. Takia, if you have anything you know that we should be taking a vote on that we haven't, if you could help
Just
us.
about everything except for fees and fines.
Okay, all right.
I'll check.
Already done fines, so.
That's what I said.
Takia said we've done everything but fees and fines. I mean, we have not done anything other than
Fees and fines.
So tomorrow could be a cleanup day. We're starting late tomorrow, right? 10:30
Yes.
after the fact? Okay. So there's another cleanup that we need, which is I've got still a whole passel of materials with April 17th as a date that I still haven't figured out exactly what all they were. I don't know if that's productive time at a finance committee meeting, but at some point I need to figure out where all of those get tucked in. And I think some of them may have already been superseded with new information. But there's an organizational chart for the city at large, which I don't think is correct. And then there's one for somebody, I can't remember who. And there's other various pieces of paper that need to be addressed.
Well, going back to the list that you went through, the budget monitoring, I think we can put that in a future column because that's not what we need to deal with right now. That's what David and staff will be working on after the budget is struck. So we can
But I think I actually would entertain a recommendation from the Finance Committee that we accept that offer from the administration. Personally, for me, it's in lieu of trying to figure out some deeper cuts right now, sort of shooting in the dark. So I'd much rather say, let's go with the administration's recommendations with the assurance that we're going to continue to monitor this much more closely than we would normally do. And by monitoring, I view that as an SOS coming from either Jody or David saying, you know, the Finance Committee needs to be aware of these developments and our proposed recommendations on whether we should worry about it or not, and if we should worry about it, what we should do about it.
You'd be talking about two different things, however.
All right.
There's one that's budget monitoring, which is the title of number 7. And that will happen in the future, not now. That's how I'm seeing that. And then
All I was saying is that we did get an offer from City Manager Gerald to do this monitoring, and I just think we should recognize that as the Finance Committee and hopefully accept that offer. So that when we pass our report on to the council, they'll have the knowledge that that is an expectation that they can have.
well, in our report, usually at the end, there is some, I'm going to call them parking lot issues, you know, we can call it whatever, but there are issues that we say, this is what will happen in the future. Or this is what, so that's where I would think that discussion would go, that we can count on the city manager for, and the finance director to, you know, do the monitoring as we go forward.
Yeah, that's fine. I find that assuring. I think that I want the council to, writ large, to know that that is there. So it'll be part of their expectation. And that's pretty much all we can do with it at this point. All right.
Okay.
Are there any other things that we need to address before we have a motion to adjourn? I do want to thank Jody and Katie again for saving me from a big cut and paste operation by giving us the page by page supplements to add in for each of the departments, information from the Munis system and all the other information that we got in the 4 packets. I found them to be enlightening. And of course, no good deed goes without punishment. It raised a few more questions, but nothing that is negative, just more curiosity. So I do want to pass that thanks along. Are there any other comments from the committee, or is there a motion to
Can I
adjourn?
ask what happened?
Before we adjourn, I think City Manager Gerald wanted to say something before I started my last discussion. Did you forget? It's been so
Did
long.
I forget or did Alderman Arnett? I didn't forget. Just very briefly, when we're talking about that, the spreadsheet that Alderman Arnett held up, I think it's important if we're going to compare numbers like that they be the actual expenditures that are in the CAFR. That we put that way we have an apples to apples to apples. That's a whole mix of different comparisons. It's some are budget, some are, I don't know what they all are, but the CAFR has the actual expenditures each fiscal year. So maybe if we're going to compare, we use those numbers instead of just kind of a random mix.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. We want to make sure we're looking at the right numbers, but I think even before that, I'd like to know what we're looking at and what its source is. I have a suspicion, but I got it without identification. So it was just shucked up gratuitously. I think it's a good kind of comparison to have over time. I pull it together myself from time to time, putting together all of my CAFRs and trying to create a time series. It is an issue that comes up from the electorate about growth in the city budget. I think that when we get to the table on page 37, the unduplicated, I think that's going to speak to that a little bit as well. But yes, I definitely agree with you, David. I don't want to look at any numbers that aren't correct numbers.
And then, there's certain obligations that the city is supposed to be making. And we didn't always, some of the pension payments and some of the OPEB that should have been made in the past that aren't accounted for in that spreadsheet either.
Right. Okay, well, thank you for that. I haven't really looked at it in any detail. It's one of those pieces of paper floating across my desktop. Jody, you were going to say something also.
What happened to the fund transfer? Do we move that to another day?
Tomorrow, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. We will put it on our agenda. Ellie?
Yeah, I had asked David this to make it easy for me to send to constituents. Can we have that PowerPoint of the special council meeting on as a link on the city website so it's easy to capture and have constituents look at? Is that possible?
So it's both on it's already been posted. It's on the city manager website as well as the finance department website. So it's in two places.
Thank you very much.
Is this the one titled The Budget and City Finance Projections Resulting from COVID-19? Yeah.
That PowerPoint. Yeah.
That was a very good PowerPoint. I meant to thank you for that. All right. Takia.
I was informed that all of the boards and commissions meetings, the agendas are posted on the city's website, and the agenda contains the Zoom link as well.
And the agenda for what?
The agenda contains the Zoom link.
I can't make out the last thing you're saying. The agenda for what?
Any boards and commissions.
Okay.
The Zoom link is attached on the agenda.
Oh, the Zoom link. That's
Yeah.
what I was missing. All right.
You were asking earlier about the FAC meeting for tomorrow and how to get to the link, and that's what she answered.
So we go to the city calendar, which I now know how to do, and there will be a Zoom link and password there.
On the
So
agenda.
I go to the Financial Advisory Commission on the calendar, and those links will be there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So let me ask, because I've been using the Google Calendar.
So that's not, no, that has nothing to do with ours. This is for boards and commissions, not,
So it's not on the Google Calendar though.
because I don't send them to you,
Email.
so I don't know that.
If Sheila, if you go to your city email, this is what I finally figured out for myself. You open up email, and then there's that little thing of 3 by 3 dots up at the top, and you click on those. One of them is calendar, and if you go to that calendar, that's the one that has all of these links in it. So going to the city email.
No,
No.
it's not.
It is for me. I don't care.
That's for standing committees. That's for the ones that I send to you. That's correct.
So let me just explain that Alderman Arnett is a regular attendee at the FACT Commission meeting, so he may be getting the invite for the FACT meetings. And the other council members would not necessarily get that invite and be able to put that on their calendar. So for those of you that are not on the regular invites, you'd go to that site that Takia was explaining to get the link to join the meeting tomorrow.
What time are they meeting tomorrow?
I think it's 8.
8 o'clock.
8 a.m.
8 a.m.
Wow.
Yeah, there is an 8 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, so 8 to 10 is when it's scheduled for.
There shouldn't be an 8 a.m., but
Can we get the that would be so helpful if we could get all of monthly. I know there's a way that you can do it on the Google Calendar, but if they could send if someone on the staff could send out a invite to all of the boards and commission meetings so we could attend if we want to. I know you can set it up on the Google Calendar some way automatically so that it reoccurs monthly. I'm not sure how. But
I am looking at the special meeting notes or.
Julian is going to share a screen to show you how to get to those meetings. The FACT meeting for tomorrow.
Okay, that would be helpful. I definitely would like to attend it.
So it's actually, if you go through the city's website, you go to the Board of Commissions.
Okay.
And then you go, so we'll go to Financial Advisory page. And we'll look at the agendas. And move this up.
May 5th.
And then download the agenda. And here at the top, Google Meet video conference is there.
Oh, it's a phone number.
So this one looks like it's I think it's still gonna be video, but it's gonna be through Google Meet.
Google Meet.
So not Zoom.
Not Zoom.
Put it back.
So does that take you to the video or does that take you, is that just a phone number?
I think you'll have to. So it looks like you'll have to enter in the phone number. I haven't played this all. I just was going through trying to see where it was, and looks like into the phone number and then that pin.
remember yesterday when we got connected to Google Meets by mistake in the beginning? So it'll take us to that app, and then we put in that code right there.
So that means you can see one another? We couldn't see one another yesterday.
Not with
Yeah,
just
I
the phone number.
Hang on, this is actually for the public to kind of come in. Let me see if I can figure out where the other one is real quick. There you go.
Yeah, that's a public phone number. Hillary will have the,
I think this meeting should be on Google Docs the same way all of our other meetings. If we're expected to be invited to it, I'm not concerned about the other boards and committees, but this meeting, I would think would be on our calendars.
So the link that Mitchell just sent to us, oh, that gets us to the same place. Oh, okay. Yeah, so it's no direct link to the Google Doc. Yeah. Oh, shit.
All right, well, hopefully we can get that sorted out today via email to us so that certainly the Finance Committee, I think, would be very good people to be able to attend that meeting in as much functionality as possible, whether that's only phone or whatever, but
Yeah, because you might even be able to make it since I don't have to get up and get dressed and go anywhere.
well, it's on the
8
phone.
o'clock in the
you know?
morning.
Yeah, right. But you'll have to hurry up and get dressed by 10:30.
So the Google Meet has both video and audio. So if you don't want to be on the video, you don't click on the camera, but it has full functionality just like Zoom does.
Okay. And
Well, we had trouble with it yesterday, so.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, it would not let us see people at all.
you didn't see me? I was there.
You were on your roof. That's why we couldn't see you. And David, maybe it was just us not knowing how to
Operator.
All right.
I move that we adjourn.
Shout out to our firefighters before we leave. Today is National Firefighter Day.
All right.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
All right.
The ayes have it. Thank you, everyone.